My name is Rebecca Zeffert, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Israel Asia Center. For those of you who don't know us yet, the Israel Asia Center is an Israeli not-for-profit organization dedicated to building a shared future between Israel and different countries in Asia. And the way that we do that, we work on two different fronts. We run programs focused on building future leaders in Israel-Asia relations, and we run public education events and thought leadership events like this one that explore different trends and developments taking place in Asia, looking at some of the biggest challenges facing countries in Asia in the next decade and how we can work together to co-innovate solutions. At the Israel Asia Center, we were really excited when in July India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi came here to Israel, and I think the excitement we saw in the general public and that was generated by the media was really phenomenal. And it's hard to really ignore the growing relations between Israel and this country, which is the fastest growing economy. And the question that everybody was left with after this trip was really, what's next? What now? How do we tap into this market that's set to become the third largest economy in the world by 2030? Well, when we look at where are market opportunities, we look at different countries, and what's really essential is to understand what are the challenges, what are the needs, what are the pain points that those countries are facing in order to really understand where are the opportunities and where to add value. And during Prime Minister Modi's visit, a number of different issues came up as potential areas for collaboration or strengthening collaboration between Israel and India. Some others included water technology, defense, smart city technology. We heard a lot about digital India. And at the Israel Asia Center, we were a little surprised that little mention was made of the workforce and the skills that were really needed to develop some of these sectors and industries. And so that's why we decided to run this event tonight. If we look at some of the numbers, they're really quite staggering. India is on track to be the youngest country with the world's largest workforce. India's 400 million millennials account for a third of India's population. That's 46% of its workforce. That's going to grow to 900 million by 2020. More than 12 million youth between 15 to 29 are expected to enter India's workforce every year for the next 2 decades. But huge gaps exist in the needs and availability of skilled labor. 2.3% of India's youth, only 2.3% of India's youth have received formal skills training. I think this is a fascinating and really quite urgent challenge that we really need to understand in order to understand where is the potential for this market opportunity. How do we train and how do we recruit, or how can India train and recruit on such a mass level? So to help us better understand this tonight, I'm going to invite our speakers to the panel. Vinay Murthy is CEO of Antal Infotech and founder of Executive 81. Please, thank you very much. Akshay Cherian is co-founder of Business Sherpa. Ishai Ram is the global vice president of Seller Group. Hilly Hurt is the Deputy Director of the PAIRS Program for Global Innovation. And Yuval Suskind is the CEO of Pollination Ventures, our partners for this evening. Thank you. Yuval, over to you.
And when we started putting the idea of the panel together in the discussion, they set the initiative on coming to Israel and looking for HR technologies. started looking around for technologies, and we're happy to say that we're able to collect a lot of companies also around the DLD and after the DLD that are relevant in the space. But I must say that after spending a few days with the delegation, it's not quite certain whether the things that Israelis are inventing and innovating in the space are as focused and understand the needs that are actually coming out of India. And so today what we're going to try to do is hear what are the challenges and what are the opportunities in the India market, and then later on we'll discuss also to see how some of these innovations that we are inventing here can be relevant.
So we are talking about more on the millennials and the scaling initiatives that we really have embarked on. So I think that is exactly one opportunity on the skilling side and another opportunity on the reskilling side. The skilling side, we are having nearly 1 million people joining the workforce every month. Okay, so that's the extent to which we are having. We have 1.5 million engineers passing out every year. So that's the kind of numbers that really come out of it. But how many are really job ready? That's the big question that we are really staring at. So we went through a lot of job creation over the last decade. So the next one is getting challenging. So that's exactly where nourishing entrepreneurship is also equally important, and that is where I'll pause and maybe let Akshay do the talking about the startup ecosystem, which probably will speak, and happy to share more data and numbers on the way.
Our operation is in Pune, which is considered the Oxford of the East. All right, all the good universities are in Pune, right? So approximately 100,000 students graduate each year in the IT industry. 100,000 each year. Okay, so all the high-tech industry, year after year after year, is graduating. So the numbers are huge, and we need to understand how we can serve this challenge of skilling them. That's one problem, the scale, and the other is millennium, which is a global issue of taking students or people who has a very short time. ADD is inherited throughout that decade, and you have to skill them, and skill them fast, and skill them in the way that they are used to get information, mobile, fast, 6-minute YouTube, etc., etc. It's something which is new to everyone in the world, and especially in India, where you have to scale and have skills of mass and to deal with that generation.
You know, I think with India, it's so big, you shouldn't think of it as one country. You should think of it as three. Purely from a business point of view, India, think of India as India A, which is wealthy, you know, I'm not following. Okay, yeah, which is wealthy and as anything anywhere, right? You can build, they would be comparable to anything in China, anything in the US. The mindsets are very similar, it's very global. India 2 is very aspirational. They are the mass space. And then India 3 is the India that you unfortunately see on a lot of documentaries, you know, the villages, things being broken, and that's a reality too. I think fundamentally, it's been very, very exciting being here in Israel. And the question in my mind that I just want to share with you and sort of wrap up with this is, how do we use technology to leapfrog a generation? Let me give you a quick example. A lot of rural India has moved, and Tier 3 India has moved straight into mobiles. They've not been personal computers, you know. And there's those kinds of shifts allow 10 years of progress in 2 to 3 years. How do we do that, right? What does that look like, and what does that look like for the problems we have around talent, around skilling, around reskilling, around mentoring, around building organizations? So this is kind of the question, I think, that is an interesting intersection between what India has and needs and what Israeli companies could provide.
So before I worked for the Payers program, I was also the commercial officer at the Embassy of India here in Tel Aviv. So it gives you both perspective of what happens when you do bilateral relations for the governments and what happens when you do it for working with the private sector and all the incubators and accelerators that are popping up. And you know, you can hear about all the schemes that are coming up in India, and we talked about them earlier: Digital India, Make in India, the Skill Development Mission, and a lot of the questions are within those schemes: how are Israelis able to really understand the opportunities and seize them? Because we've been late to the game before, and you can see, for example, that when it comes to skill development, the UK, the US, Japan are already there. They're already building collaborations and training centers and investing and building campuses. And we have a history with India when it comes to training. So we started with diamonds when Israelis came and they trained and they did tech transfer and skill development, and then the Indians became even better than us. And then we moved into the defense sector, and there were a lot of incentives as doing tech transfer in defense. So we moved manufacturing to India, and we trained high quality people that could really deliver. But there are so many other opportunities. And you said you were from HR and not necessarily tech, and those opportunities lie in both areas. So yes, it's great that, you know, Israelis have the opportunity to identify and say, listen, there is tech needed in the HR field, and we're going to pinpoint those needs and understand them, because you can't just take HR solutions from Israel in bulk and move them to India. You really have to understand and adapt. But at the same time, Israel has a lot of capacities that aren't tech related. If it's what we do in Israel in nursing or in rehabilitation or in education and social business models, things that we know how to do these models best. And also when you look at India's initiatives. So yes, when you look at skill development, there is the part that's related to IT, but you can't forget that 70% of the population still lives in rural areas. And that population isn't the IT population. It's not the Bangalore one. So what are you going to provide that population? And that's also a gap that could be identified. And it's Israelis' responsibilities, innovators, entrepreneurs, businesses' responsibilities to go look at India, see what schemes are available, whether it's in Make in India and manufacturing, or India is creating jobs through innovation, which is Israel's core. And there's literally, it's called skill development and entrepreneurship. And really see what is there, and then be able to provide what's needed. And just to finish with an anecdote, you can even see when Prime Minister Modi came, he launched with Israel's Prime Minister the India-Israel Bridge. One of those partners in the bridge is an entity called iCreate, which sits in Gujarat, the state where the Prime Minister is from. The flag initiative of the Prime Minister was iCreate. It's a whole campus, an entrepreneurship center, an innovation center. And the idea is to use innovation to create jobs, to use innovation to create new skills. So they understand that innovation is also a way to leap into that. So there's just so much going on. It's just a matter of, you know, seizing the right opportunity for each of the Israelis in the space.
I think of late the proactiveness is increasing from a government policy making perspective. I'm sure demonetization and all of them had made enough global headlines as well. From that point of view, the three overlapping initiatives which could actually impact what we are talking today are Digital India, Skill India, and the Make in India campaign. So I think those three are really, really correlated. So we are moving to a heavily cash economy to paperless economy with the first initiative. And there is a GST rollout, which probably, if you were aware, so there were several different taxes. Yeah, sorry? Okay, goods and sales tax. So that's particularly goods and services tax. I'm sorry. So that's particularly was a distributed one with every different industry paying a different tax at a state level, central level. So there was an amalgamation of over 24 different taxes that was being paid into a single tax. So that's making life easy for people coming and wanting to do business in India as well. So every initiative at a policy level has started to happen. started to happen, okay? So that's where it's headed. And I think labor is the next upcoming reforms that we are really going to see in India. And we're really excited about that because we see a lot of workforce, especially at the bottom of the pyramid in the unorganized segment. And that's when that starts consolidating, that's when you'll see the ripple effect coming up and the economy booming, okay? Then the Skill India. So how do we go about really training making the graduates who are engineering by education to really superior quality engineering jobs? So how do we go about doing that? And there are millions of non-engineering graduates, the commerce, science, arts graduates who are rolling in, and their jobs and what they're really studying for about 3 years has very little in correlation. So that's another set of people who are coming in. How do we align their skill sets to what is exactly coming out in terms of jobs? So do we really need them to go through a whole 3 year of graduation is another big question. Okay, so and there is another large set, which is about 50%, who are not really getting into graduation but joining the workforce. So what kind of vocational training programs and what kind of learnings can it be given on a digital format may be supported by the non-digital infrastructure, that is the grassroots infrastructure. To give you an example, there are trade test centers which were set up across India, which existed already because a lot of people from India migrated to Middle East, the manual labor workforce, which came over in the last few decades. So these centers were used mainly as centers to validate their skills and then hire them. It was not open for anything else. Actually, I mean, it was very surprising for us to go through it. While we were in DLD, the Indian embassy head walks in, and then the person walks in, and then they proposed to us, why not come forward and then maybe make use of those infrastructure. While we expressed that concern that it's not opened up, there's an infrastructure available to do those. So it's complementary format that is going to start work because India is a very high touch from high tech, there is no adoption issues, we can do that, but there is a high touch which is also necessary. You can't just give them a product and then forget about everything. There has to be a touch. So there is an online, offline combination of solutions which has to be built up, and that's exactly where we'll see a lot of opportunities.
Today, Israel isn't oriented to developing tech training, capacity building solutions for the middle lower income communities of India, and that is just, you know, waiting to happen. And you can even see during the schemes that the Prime Minister signed on that they were looking at agriculture, water, and digital health. And those are places where they're looking to reskill, and they're looking to skill new because there is that gap. And Israel has that ability, and the incentives are there. So that would be another option. And if you look at the statistics, the Skill Initiative said it would skill 400 million by 2022. In the past 2 years, they've actually skilled 11.7 million. So the gap between what the goal is and what they want to do is huge. That's where we come in. And Israelis have that creativity that you were talking about to identify the issue and fill in that gap. And that's for us to do our homework.